the second edition of the Liberty Hour with Rhonda Greene.
Well, hello. This is Rhonda Greene. I have Max Greene with me, as well as the Honorable David Norton. If you could read the disclaimer, David, that'd be great.
Yes, the views and opinions expressed on this program are our own and are not the views and opinions of WSLM or its management or employees.
Excellent. Okay, so today we're going to talk about two things: drug use in the county, and also the Property Tax Assessment Board, and how our government is not really doing anything about it. Okay, first off, drugs. All right, so we've gotten a big response on Facebook on this, so we're not really, very excited, but it's something that people need to talk about, is what we've found. And so I'm gonna go ahead and just give you a insight into how we feel about it a little bit. Now, drugs, we consider drug use to be a part of human nature. Here, us in the studio, we all have the potential to fall into some kind of addiction, and because we are creatures of habit. Some things have a chemical hold on us: sugar, heroin, alcohol, tobacco, which means that also it's hard for people to stop using it. Okay, so and in a lot of ways, making it illegal keeps people from getting access to therapy and support. So here's so there it is, right in a nutshell. Let's go ahead, David. You were talking really well on that.
Yes, I got really interested and concerned about this after what happened in Scott County and Austin with just to go into that, and because I think it's important, because we're in Washington County, or right next door. I live in Little York, so Austin is just about 5 miles away as the crow flies. So this is a big concern for the county. And what they had in Scott County, they estimate that they have 400 people that are injecting some kind of opiate in their arm. So heroin or Opana, which is a opium-like pill that they crush and mix that and put it in their arm. They have, and what that has led to, people share needles. And when they share needles, they transfer germs. And people can get HIV, which is the virus which becomes AIDS eventually, which used to be a death sentence. Now it's not quite so much. Some people live a long time with certain drugs. But also hepatitis C and other hepatitis, which I think actually is causing more expense and perhaps more death in the end. But they have 188 people that they know of who got HIV from injecting drugs in Scott County. And most of this, I think, was in Austin. So we're talking about Scott County, but really very much of this was in Austin, which is a town with 4,000 people. And so they're estimating that about 10% of the town is shooting something like heroin or other opiates into their arm. And so that's 10% of the town shooting drugs. Or 5% that have HIV. Just imagine if your church has 100 people in it, that 10 of those were shooting drugs and 5 of those had HIV, which leads to AIDS. So you can see how this problem gets very out of hand. And they said that some people that were infected were in surrounding counties, including Washington County is one of the counties known. And we see in the paper, we see that people are arrested with meth and pot and other things, but also with paraphernalia, including syringes. So if people have syringes in Washington County being arrested, they're shooting the same thing. They're sharing needles. And to me, part of this was just about common sense about economic development. We in government meetings we hear a lot of talk about economic development. We need to do this or we need to do that for economic development. But think about it. We saw Scott County and Austin on the CBS, NBC, ABC News, Fox News. It was on nationwide. And this is publicity for the county, that lots of people in the county are on opiates and have HIV. So you think about that if you're a company wanting to go to a county. Let's see, here's a county that has lots of drug users, lots of people with HIV. Is this where I want to build a factory and move my family and my kids? So I think this is a huge problem for economic development. The best thing we could do for the economy of Washington County is make sure we don't go down the same road as Scott County. And they went down that road because we're putting people in jail instead of giving them drug treatment. And you know, people aren't getting tested. You have to go out of the county for drug treatment, out of the county for drug testing. And just a statistic, just the people that they know about, the 188 people infected with HIV, is going to cost $100 million. So that's, you say, well, let them pay for it, their treatment themselves. Well, if they're paying for their treatment, they're not buying things. So it's $100 million coming out of the county, whether they're paying for it or whether it's going for incarceration or treatment by the county, or whether it's the state. If the state pays for it, that comes out of our taxes. If the feds pay for it, that comes out of our taxes. So this is a huge expense, and I think the best thing for economic development is to get ahead of this. We can't build enough prisons and jails to get out of this problem. I know a lot of people out there thinking, well, let's just put them all in jail. That's a reaction. If they're in jail, they can't hurt us. Well, first of all, you'd have to find them. We've been jailing people for drugs. The drug war has lasted for 40 years. We've spent trillions of dollars. We have worse problems in Scott County and Washington County than before we launched the drug war. Putting people in jail has not stopped people from shooting heroin or using drugs. And Scott County, but let's say we did. Let's try it. Suppose we could catch them all and put them in jail. Well, it costs $2,000 a month in Scott County for each inmate that has HIV. So if Scott County were to take all those 188 people with HIV that are shooting drugs and put them in jail, that would cost, let's see, $2,000 a month times 12 months times 188 people. It would take $4.5 million per year for Scott County to treat all of those people just for HIV if they were in jail. Now that doesn't count the guards, the other medical care, the bologna sandwiches, you know, all the other expenses of putting in some people in jail, which is a lot, and the court costs for arresting them. And the jail that would hold 188 people, well, we know from Scott County and Washington County that a jail that size would cost about $9 million to build. So this would tremendously affect our taxes. Plus, the worst thing is, it doesn't work. You can't catch all of those people. And when people get out of jail, then they're ex-cons, and they can't get a job. And what have they been doing in jail? Meeting meth cooks and people that sell drugs. So if you take away people's way to earn a living and you make them friends only with meth cooks and drug dealers, what kind of a job do you think they're going to do when they get out? The Pat Robertson, who is no libertarian, not a liberal, not in favor of drugs, Pat Robertson, CBN News Network, had a report that drug treatment cost only 1/3 as much as putting people in jail. But it had a lower recidivism rate than jail. A recidivism is how many people go back to doing what they were doing before. So in other words, if you took the same people and instead of putting them in jail, if you put them in drug treatment, it would cost only 1/3 as much. And it would get more people off of drugs than putting them in jail. So if you really want people to get off of drugs, then you want them to go into drug treatment instead of jail. If you want less young people using drugs. Well, let's take the case of Portugal. Portugal decriminalized drugs, which meant they quit treating it as a crime. And they took half of the money that they were spending on law enforcement in jails, and they spent it on drug treatment. So they didn't just legalize. They spent the money for drug treatment. Half of it. And what happened was the overdose deaths came down a lot. I think it was about 25 to 50%. And also, less young people were using drugs. And less people overall were using drugs. Because once you decriminalize it and you get people into rehab, you get more people off of it, then you have less people selling. There's less money in it if it's not illegal. And so you don't have people pushing it. You know, you like just like alcohol. You don't have people on the street corners or in front of the school selling whiskey, because all adults can go to the liquor store and get whiskey. So, and they don't want to lose their license, so they don't want to sell to kids. But once you make it illegal, then that person, you got somebody that's already breaking the law. He's already breaking the law. So he's willing to break other laws, like selling to kids, selling adulterated product, etc. So, any comments, Rhonda?
That's awesome. You came prepared. We kind of like talked about it this morning, and you know, very, very elegant way to propose that. The thing of it is that, you know, we're not for drug use, you know,
exactly,
as a party, even, or as individuals and stuff like that. And we've all been, it's hard not to meet somebody who hasn't been touched by this. They're still your family. They're still your kids, your spouse, your brother or sister. And it's something that you can't talk about without fear of legal repercussions. And so it goes unhelped and undealt with. And it's just an open sore. And, you know, in response to dealing with drug use, our own personal county, you know, asked themselves, what would Jesus do? Well, it sounds like Jesus wanted to build a $17 million jail facility? I don't think so. You know, it's really, you know, that's another thing too, but, you know, being a Christian government, so to speak, we're not very Christian in our dealing with people in the community. So, you know, that's an aside on my part. But yes,
Well, I think so. Look at alcohol.
Right.
If somebody's addicted to alcohol, well, they'll stand up in the church. They'll come forward and get prayer. They'll tell the preacher. They can tell their friends.
Right.
They can say, hey, where can I get treated for alcohol? But if they're shooting heroin, first of all, it's illegal. So it's a problem for them to talk to people. You know, they're afraid to talk to their pastor or their family or their church members, or to come forward. And so they're, I read one, getting prepared for this, I was reading, looking up with Google, looking at a lot of the stories that I read about last spring and summer about the epidemic in Scott County. And there was one of the drug users that was in their needle exchange program that said if they had a drug treatment in Scott County, that she thought that everybody she knew that was shooting the heroin would go for the drug treatment. Now, she's probably wrong and probably exaggerating, but I imagine a lot of people that are shooting drugs would like to be off of it.
Right.
And they're not going to turn themselves into jail just to be thrown into jail to get a criminal record. But if there was a drug facility in drug treatment in Scott County or Washington County, I mean, this could actually be a drug treatment center in Washington County. This wasn't the thing I wanted to talk about.
Well, no, sorry.
But there are jobs in the healthcare industry. That's one of the fastest growing things. And this might be a good thing for the county to get people off of drugs, and also the drug treatment, who knows, we could become a center for the area.
Right.
Gosh knows there's enough people that need it.
Right. And there's also a lot of discussion about legalizing marijuana, which, I mean, once again, you go back to it. If it's illegal to do it, then people hide their use, and the wrong people make money off of it. And not only so-called criminal element, but in a way, I would just as soon be like the city on or the town on Mayberry. The television show, not in real life. That's a whole different beast altogether. But where all you really had to worry about was jaywalking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it increases government and it increases our taxes with the desire to have more control over the community. It costs us more. It costs us a jail. And that's an extreme.
Yeah.
I just assume not have a big mountainous jail on the hill.
Well, just think about it. A lot of people have tried marijuana.
Yeah.
A lot of kids will try marijuana, are trying marijuana. And do you want all those kids that are trying the marijuana to go and buy it from the drug dealer who is also selling meth and heroin? And it's, so if you buy alcohol, you don't have to go and buy it from the guy that is also selling meth and heroin. And something about marijuana is that in all the states that have decriminalized marijuana in some way, that have medical marijuana, that the overdose deaths from heroin have went down. And what they think is that some people that have chronic pain or have gotten addicted to the pain medication, and really, when we're talking about these heroin addicts, almost all of them are really people that started getting pain medication. A very large number of these people got addicted because they were in a car wreck or somehow, or have a bad back, or were taking pain medication. They became addicted eventually to pain medication, which is just other forms of opiates, except they came in a pill and they came from a doctor. And then when they started figuring out that people were abusing this or getting addicted, they had to crack down on prescription pain medication. And what did that do? Like Rhonda was saying, that this is human nature. People get addicted to things. And so these people started turning to the drug dealers and getting illegal opiates and injecting stuff in their arms. So when you crack down in one place with this drug addiction problem, it pops up somewhere else. You crack down on cocaine, and then you have a crack epidemic. You crack down on the crack epidemic, then you have a meth epidemic. And this is what happens. But they think that some of these people with back problems and chronic pain and people addicted to painkillers and shooting opiates, that where they can get medical marijuana, they started using pot instead of taking the opiates. And that's why they have had about a 25% reduction in opiate deaths in every state that has legalized marijuana. And the state taxes it, and there's a control, and it's not sprinkled with opium. When people are buying illegal marijuana, they don't know what's in it. It could have PCP or opium, and so we need to deal with this in a straightforward way. Something I just found yesterday when I was looking up information for this was in Texas, which is a very conservative Republican state. They were expecting 17,000 new jail inmates. And the Republicans that were in charge in the legislature on the committee over prisons, they decided that they didn't want to build more prisons out of Republican care about taxes and fiscal restraint. And they decided, let's go the drug treatment way instead of incarcerating people. And they used, it was going to cost them $500 million, $500 million to build new jails to house these 17,000 new inmates. And instead they spent half of that. They spent it on drug treatment, and they even closed 3 prisons in Texas. So, and they had a reduction in crime. So if you're worried about crime, these people are out robbing and stealing, well, the best way to get people off of drugs and reduce crime is to get them into drug treatment. Drug treatment works better than jail. Drug treatment is cheaper than jail. Drug treatment doesn't make people into ex-cons. People can work and contribute to society. So I think this is a win-win-win. And there was one more thing. Needle exchanges. This was resisted in Scott County and resisted by the state government, conservative people, even, from what I read, even the local health officials were backwards about, I don't know about a needle exchange. This is just going to enable people. But at the time they were having this epidemic, they were getting 20 new cases of HIV a week. 20 new infections per week. And then when they instituted the needle exchange, this went down to 1 infection every couple of weeks. And the needle exchange, I heard people, argued with people on Facebook that this is just enable them, why should we pay for their needles? It's like, it cost between $300,000 to $600,000 for HIV treatment for one person infected with HIV during their lifetime. And needles cost a few cents. So if you can spend a few cents to keep from spending $600,000, that sounds smart. And you look at Scott County, they estimated that this HIV epidemic will cost $100 million. And I think that we in Washington County, we don't want our kids infected with AIDS. We don't want hepatitis, which people end up having to have liver transplants. These are close to being death sentences. And a needle exchange requires the addicts to turn in their old needles for the new needles. This keeps the needles from being found in the playgrounds. In Scott County, they found needles in the playgrounds of the schools, the elementary schools, in the public parks. And any kid could pick up a needle and get infected with AIDS. So a needle exchange, all it does is keeps them from sharing needles and sharing diseases and from leaving needles all over the playgrounds and the parks. And it's the county commissioners that can authorize a needle exchange. When the state authorized this for Scott County, they said any county can do it if the commissioners ask for it. Now they have to produce some evidence. So, if the county commissioners are telling the county health nurse and county health professionals, hey, gather the statistics, we'll get a needle exchange, they will do it. It can be done. So I'm urging you to talk to your commissioners, tell them this is this affects taxes, this affects economic development. We don't want to show up in the headlines like Scott County. And the reason Scott County hit the headlines was one person was pregnant, had a baby, and babies are automatically tested. And so if that person had not had a baby, HIV might still be rampaging through Scott County, and nobody know it because, maybe the disease didn't pop out. So we could have dozens of people right now in Washington County spreading AIDS, sharing needles, and we need to get a needle exchange as quick as we can so we don't end up in the headlines. And we need to be able to tell business people that we are proactive and getting ahead of these things and not reactive and just waiting for a couple hundred people to get infected with AIDS before we pull our head out of the ground.
Well, and it's not promoting. A needle exchange is not promoting drug use.
Yes.
A needle exchange is a way for families to deal with supporting their family's health, because that's the thing. You may get over drugs, but you're not going to get over AIDS.
Yes.
Or HIV or anything similar to that nature. And
hepatitis C.
Hepatitis C is not awesome either. As far as having something.
And I think we already know that we have elevated numbers of hepatitis C in Washington County, which is what they saw in Scott County before the AIDS came. So once you see the elevated levels of hepatitis C, you already know people are sharing needles. So all it takes is one person with HIV to share a needle to get it into the Washington County community. And they don't just hand out these needles. They urge these addicts to get drug treatment, to get into rehab. And they said that they have gotten a lot of people into rehab. So this is a place where the health professional can talk to the addicts and say, hey, why don't you get into rehab? And it gets people into rehab. So they have done studies where they've had needle exchanges, and they haven't found that this causes an increase in people using drugs. And just think about it. Is anybody going to say, oh, okay, I'm going to shoot heroin because I can get free needles? There's nobody that ever said, I'm not going to take heroin, and then somebody said, oh, but you can get free needles. So I said, oh, I think I'll shoot heroin then. That's not how it works. That nobody wants the needle exchange except people that are already on heroin. And,
it's not like an Easter basket where you give them so, no. But that's the thing. It's like being able to deal with the problems in our community instead of pushing it out the door and trying to pretend it's not there. That's not the right way. And that's what we've been doing. We shouldn't be making money off of somebody else's sorrow and pain. And I know that the county, the main reason to build this new jail was to go ahead and fund the government on other levels. It's disgusting to me, personally.
Well, if they're coming in to exchange needles, they've not hit rock bottom yet, but they need to know the next time they have a bad ride or something don't work out right that there is some alternative. And that's the thing, by having the treatment facility information available to them ahead of time, then when they do hit the skids where they're ready to give up, whether they couldn't score or whatever, or whatever reason, they couldn't deal with what they got. There's something laying there on the table for them to look at and say, well, I'm done this time. I'm going to go ahead and look for help.
That's a good point. That it gives them a contact with a healthcare professional that knows about their problem, somebody to go to for health issues, including rehab. Whenever they get ready for rehab, they know that they have a person that can help them, direct them into it. That's a good point. And I don't know, did I talk about Portugal?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Yes, you did. Okay.
I don't want to repeat myself.
So we're trying to go over the subject as thoroughly as possible and try to figure out what questions you might have. And these are, we've done a lot of research into it and about human behavior and that kind of thing. So we're trying to put forward a way to deal with families in crisis, a community in crisis. even though you don't hear about drug use or that kind of thing, it is out there, and it is affecting families and their well-being. Families and individuals and just the community in general. Okay. Is there anything else?
I think I'll give you some links for the internet, which you could put up on Indiana Proud.
Right.
Sometime have them up there by tomorrow, and I guess they could contact me or you on Facebook and talk about these issues. There's a Libertarian Party of Washington County, Indiana Facebook page
Right.
that has links to these things, or you could contact us there and discuss these things.
I had a Tumblr account called the Chatterbox that I could go ahead and reinitiate and see if we can't get some community input and try to work on it from there, because it's not just us three sitting here trying to figure it out. It's the community. It takes a village to go ahead and support the weaker part of our community, to raise and support our families and stuff. So, okay. So, links